What's a harmless habit people have that actually says a lot about them? Story 1. Saying they'll do something and they actually follow through. Or if something comes up where they can't, they don't ghost you but apologetically let you know immediately. Story 2. I went to a baseball game last night with my dad. It was delayed for an hour due to rain. We were fortunate enough to stumble upon a towel giveaway in the concourse, and were able to dry our seats before the game started. As towelless fans trickled into our section, my dad was going out of his way to bring them our towels. Probably about a dozen or so fans, and he's springing up from his seat at 70, having worked a full day on his feet rushing to help them dry their seats. His harmless habit is being hyper-aware of what's going on around him because he feels some incessant duty to help. I admire it deeply. Story 3. I had a roommate who always refolded his laundry immediately after someone touched it, even if it was still folded. Turns out he grew up in a super strict household where that was a control thing. Story 4. A harmless habit like talking to yourself out loud or making strange noises when no one is looking can say a lot. That person is probably creative, a little distractible, and definitely never bored with themselves. Story 5. Leaving grocery items that they change their mind about on random different shelves instead of putting them away or handing them to the cashier. Leaving their grocery cart in a parking space rather than the cart corral. Story 6. This might sound cheap, but when people Venmo you within less than a day of buying something they know they owe you for, it just goes a really long way in my book of saying, 1. I see you and acknowledge that you bought something on my behalf, and 2. I appreciate you doing such. It drives me crazy when people take forever to Venmo you or forget to altogether. Story 7. Willingly offering to pick someone up, drop someone off at the airport. For me, it's an act of love, regardless of when the flight is. I never ask for money, but rather an energy drink. Story 8. I have a habit of helping waitstaff, like I will properly put my utensils and properly folded napkins to make it easier for them. Also, if their hands are full, I'll pick up the plate and hand it off. My fiance finds it endearing. You're such a big teddy bear. And yes, tipping culture in general in US is absolutely insane. Story 9. Perfect health people, who just chronic illness people for ways we cope. OMG, have you cut out sugar? Sarah, I have cut out everything and you're next. Story 10. I'm responding to some of the comments about cleaning. The ideal world would have all of society keeping a clean home, yard, garage, and car. For disabled people, people who work so hard to put food on the table that they've no physical energy left, and those suffering from depression or anxiety, this isn't always a top priority. I'm not saying dirty dishes and junk everywhere, but some clutter and things not being put away. Some people will keep piles of clothes, magazines, or other items in piles near them because it's the only thing they feel that they can control. I have an invisible disability that also includes chronic fatigue and bouts of anxiety and depression. I struggle with keeping my clothes picked up and putting away my mail. When I do put everything where it belongs, I do a very thorough job of it. I don't have dirty dishes lying around or half-eaten food all over. Nor do I have a dirty bathroom. It's mostly just the bedroom that is an issue, and it's just picking up my clothes and sorting through the mail that struggle with. Story 11. I've known people who would ask, "What's your plan for Saturday?" When I replied that I haven't made plans, they would follow up with, "Oh, then can you help me move, or can you take me to the airport?" So whenever I need to ask for help, I always state what I'll be doing, what time I'll be doing it, and I would appreciate it if they can lend me a hand, and that it's okay to say no if they are busy. Story 12. When people say they are blunt or brutally honest instead of just admitting they are an insufferable and won't do any internal work to not be such a. Story 13. How they handle their nasal secretions. Snot rockets, hawk, and 2. A loud squonk and spit. All of those. It turns my stomach immediately, even blowing loudly into a tissue, inspecting the results, and commenting on the results. Gone nah. Story 14. If they think they are entitled to a certain type of response, I find it very telling how people in various situations think that just because they try to initiate a conversation, how much they think they have a right to a certain type of response. X. In work, I shared with Bob about what I did last weekend, but he isn't sharing anything about what he did X. In dating, I messaged this person, but they didn't respond. Gender are all shallow. X. In job searching, I cold reached out to these people. They should at least send a curtsy email. X. On the bus, I told her she had a pretty smile, and she didn't thank me IMO. It's nice when people respond, but no one owes you a response. Story 15. People who initiate any form of something indicating that a relationship is meaningful to them, be it initiating a hangout session, a conversation, or making some sort of effort to maintain contact, even if it's been a while. Story 16. Random compliments. I like your hair, you look nice, I like your laugh, that kind of stuff, but not just to a partner, to everyone. People who actually do that genuinely are not only normally the kindest, they're also normally the strongest and least emotionally. Story 17. I do want to say that being overly kind to others makes them great people, but often it also says about them they are not too kind to themselves. always putting themselves in the last place, etc. And that's sad, because they deserve better. Story 18. Constantly bringing back the conversation to themselves, talking about themselves. TBH, that was me when I was younger, and a very close friend called me out on it. I'm glad he did because I stopped that day, and now I'm very conscious about people who do it, especially when I'm in groups. I'll make it a point to ask the people who get talked over to repeat what they were saying, so we can bring the conversation back to them. Story 19. Always interrupting people in conversations. Seems harmless or even enthusiastic at first, but it can signal a lack of awareness or an unconscious need to dominate social spaces. Story 20. There's a guy where I work who just randomly buys me and one other person chocolate. Not like boxes, but those share bags. Says it's because of how nice we are to him and everyone else. So I guess that he doesn't do it to be thanked or make our colleagues jealous because he does it in secret when it's just us. He does it to show his appreciation. Story 21. I don't like people who don't know how to listen and accept other opinions. To me, they are arrogant and overconfident individuals who see nothing beyond their own ego. Story 22. How people treat service workers. It seems small, but if someone's consistently rude or dismissive to a barista or waiter, it tells you everything you need to know. It's never just about having a bad day, that's how they really act when they think power dynamics are in their favor. Story 23. They put other people down via jokes while uplifting themselves. And of course, make they are a women, so they have female privilege. Welcome to my coworker Donna. Story 24. Personally, at one place I worked, they were so nice to me that when they complimented me on how good I worked, I thought they was lying or something. It was SpongeBob saying good job to you, they were that nice. It made me feel out KF place. Since other jobs I would usually get yelled at if I did something wrong. But whenever I was late, they was pretty chill. Story 25. When they go shopping, whether they return the cart after or just leave it by the car, kind of falls into 3. Those who don't return it at all, they'll just leave their cart behind somebody else's car. It's somebody else's problem now. Those who go most of the way, they'll move it near the cart drop-off, but that's it. And those who actually put the cart back properly. It's such a simple task to do, but so many don't do it. Story 26. It's very funny to me, some of the top comments and many others are all positive traits. Yes, they're harmless, but folks, why would OP phrase it that way if they're looking for good habits? Something like drinking directly out of the milk bottle fits the bill. Following through on obligations does not. Story 27. Not putting their shopping cart in the cart corral or back where the carts live if no cart corral. Speaks volumes to someone's character. There is no reward for doing the right thing, and no penalty for not doing the right thing. Story 28. Actually being present and listening when others talk, then asking follow-up questions about the subject. It's a harmless habit, but if you can do it, people who you may dislike will usually like you and have positive things to say about you. Story 29. Biting their fingernails. Shows a lack of self-control and disregard for basic hygiene. It also make your fingers look gross. I really do judge people by how well kept their fingernails are. And for the record, long fake nails are only slightly less gross than short bitten ones. Story 30. I've always felt like people with harmless addictions are running away from something, whether it be routinely eating a healthy food, working out, or some hobby like gardening. Story 31. Aiming for wildlife in the roadway. With a vehicle, killing small animals on purpose is problematic. The better way to handle this is lean on your horn. It scares the animal into crossing the road. Story 32. My mom always buys a couple of the saddest looking cupcakes at a bake sale, as well as some better ones. I once asked her why, and she said that someone took time baking them and would notice if nobody bought them. She's done many big things, but this is a tiny thing that says a lot about her. Story 33. One harmless habit people have that can actually say a lot about them is the way they organize their space, whether it's their desk, room, or even their car. Story 34. How someone handles their phone when they're just sitting around doing nothing. Some people scroll social nonstop, others check their calendar for fun, some play word games, and then there are those who literally just hold their phone and stare off into space. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it says so much. It's kind of a tiny window into how someone deals with downtime or silence, or being alone with their thoughts. Story 35. Cleaning litter. Adopting, rescuing life rather than birthing more innocence, ignorance. Not identifying with politic. Finding happiness in the present moment. Getting enjoyment out of spending the least amount of money versus enjoyment out of buying things they don't really need. Growing food. Story 36. People pleasing. If you're just holding it in and do whatever someone else wants, you're not pleasing anyone. You're building resentment, and it's going to damage your relationship beyond repair when you reach the point where you can't take it anymore. Story 37. Knuckle cracking. It's very annoying to the people around them. It's like having someone sporadically throw a handful of firecrackers at you throughout the day. The people who do this are completely addicted, and there's no safe way to ask them to stop. The more stress they're under, the more they pop their knuckles. Story 38. The way people eat popcorn at the movies. Some nibble slowly and politely, others go full vacuum mode in the trailers. It's popcorn, but also a personality test. Story 39. People who go out and do karaoke nearly every night of the week as an excuse to binge drink. They will find a separate bar that does karaoke for each day of the week, and if you choose not to go to these events as much anymore, you will rarely see them. Story 40. Saying that they'll do something but never actually does it, and then you have to constantly remind them. Eventually, you talk to them about that behavior, and they work on it for 2 weeks, then they're back to square one, and it's a repeated cycle. Story 41. People who complain out loud about high prices in a restaurant or shops, repeatedly like they want it to look like a joke, like the waiter could do anything about it. Story 42. Waiting for people. Waiting for your whole group to get somewhere, not letting someone straggle on alone, waiting for the presence of others before you make a group decision that affects everyone. Story 43. Someone who says it's no rush every time you're expected to do something, because when they say that, I never rush to get it done. Then they eventually wonder why I took forever to do that thing, because you told me you weren't in a hurry. Therefore, I took my time. What did you expect to happen? I'm just being totally honest. And I've 100 noticed that when I used to tell people no hurry, or just do it whenever you can, it took forever for that thing to get done. Story 44. Pretending you like or love a friend when you actually don't. There's nothing wrong with being straight up and just being polite, but there is no reason to lavish how much you love, care, and respect a friend if you really don't feel that way. It will lead to a lot of pain when they think you'll be there for them, only to be left with the lonely sound of crickets. Story 45. Lamau. Oh, some of these higher-up comments are over here making me feel called out as in a bad way. I have PTSD and ADHD, as well as a dearth of other, non-relevant mental illness and disorders. And the combination of those two for me, particularly in conjunction with internet-connected electronics that we use constantly to access social media, are a huge issue for me because of my chronic and uncontrollable motherfucking habit coping mechanism of completely and totally just shutting down and avoiding contact with social media or people over social media. I just ice everyone out and ignore all of my apps and messaging platforms and services, sometimes for months at a time. I'll occasionally get triggered, go through a crisis, have an episode, whatever, and subsequently retreat within myself and go no contact with the internet for weeks at a time or more. And then by the time that I feel comfortable enough to reconnect to it again and start slow by maybe catching up on some YouTube for a couple of days or something, the guilt and shame I have over disappearing on my online and only friends actively prevents me from biting the bullet and actually contacting them again. Then of course I get more guilty over not speaking to them or letting them know that I'm okay, and I put the whole thing off for even longer. Day by day I get more guilty, put off checking in even more, get more guilty, etc. It's a horrible cycle and it's hard as to break. I'm just lucky to have found a few sympathetic, understanding friends who don't judge me for going MIA a few times a year because they genuinely sort of get me and get it. They're really good at giving me my space and at showing concern while not overcrowding me or smothering me and pushing too hard to me after those periods pop up and pass by. TLDR. My long rambling point here being that we out there who have a history of mental illness and chronic ghosting, we don't mean to do it. It's genuinely not done on purpose. Some of us just literally cannot help it and we're sorry. Most of the time, at the end of the day, we're just trying not to bog you, our friends and family, our support systems, down with all of our incomprehensibly presenting nonsense. In my case, I shut down and go into prolonged freeze mode due to my PTSD, coupled with and compounded by the executive dysfunction caused by my ADHD. It's not a fun time when they act up in toxic synergy, and it's all I can do to get up and feed myself when an episode gets bad. And in those scenarios, replying to my admittedly few texts and messages is one of the farthest things from my mind. It all honestly just makes me miss a time when you didn't have to be electronically available 24/7. You know? When taking longer than 10 minutes to respond to a text wasn't so essentially taboo and people weren't shouting in your ear across the abyss all the time. Sometimes it's hard not to feel so out of place and alien, not being as constantly connected to everything going on, as it's going on, as everyone else seems to be by default. I haven't even had a working cell phone plan in over 5 years, some of that willingly, most of it not. Some days when I walk around, I feel like some cave person who found fire and decided that it wasn't for them. Story 46. Sharing on social media. It's really harmless and in theory is beneficial for one getting things off their chest, rather than bottling up and compartmentalizing issues which lead to depression. Whereas actually thinking that to even be the case might show an ability for recognizing one's ability for unlocking cognitive awareness in untangling complex behavior patterns that lead to such conclusion as those being incongruent with having negative effects. Story 47. I ended a friendship last year and the last straw had something to do with that. It was a major thing we had set out to do, which required I work for hour every day to make items for the thing. She needed to cancel, and in retrospect I realized she had passively tried to imply that in text messages, however she never directly said it, and was practically speaking in riddles that are only decipherable after the fact. She waited until the very last minute to cancel. She was known to be flaky sometimes and had done other pretty shitty things, so I knew it was time to just end it immediately. I understand that things come up, but when a person avoids the issue instead of communicating it clearly, which causes more issues for the other person, that's just really shitty. So I really value people who keep communication lines open and aren't afraid to be direct. Story 48. I am a reformed ghoster from maybe like 14, 22 years old. I'm just saying people who ghost you could have depression or anxiety. Just saying not everyone does, but some people could. Depends on the experience that you had, I guess. I'm pretty stoned, 12 mean of edibles and 2 green apple 99s got me feeling real good. But also, I do cancel plans in a timely manner and also give a solid heads up if I'm running late before I leave the house. Story 49. My partner means, well, but says things like, "I'll get to the rest of the dishes tomorrow," and like I know they believe they will, but a lot of the time they don't. They just rather stop saying that, TBH. Story 50. That little thing actually doing what you said you'd do is like a quiet promise kept. It shows someone's respect for your time and feelings, even when life throws a curveball. Honestly, it's the small honesty in those moments that tells you who's real. Story 51. I skip the saying part and go right to doing. Like if I'm gonna throw a basketball at a teen, I just do it. Be the change you want to see in the world. Story 52. When I was drinking, I knew how flaky I was. Constantly late, canceling plans at the last minute, either because I was too hungover, too drunk to drive, or because I wanted to keep drinking alone. Now that I'm sober, I show up when I promise. I follow through with plans and commitments. I'm someone my family and friends can rely on. I realized how impactful that was after your comment. Thank you. Story 53. Conversely, I had a friend who was once late, and she, 1, let me know, 2, didn't give me a bullshit excuse. She told me something along the lines of, I have no good reason to be late. I made myself be late. I appreciated the way she owned up to it. Story 54. I tell people who don't do this and cancel last minute or just ghost. I know it's embarrassing to admit you can't do what you've said you could, but isn't it less embarrassing to admit it before it's supposed to happen? And they always agree, but never change. Story 55. My boyfriend and I went to a coffee shop on the first date. I immediately liked him, but it was when he brought our mugs to the counter when we were done that hooked me. Story 56. Never thought of that, TBH. I always thought it was odd when people comments how clean I was, but it always just bothered me when something wasn't clean. Story 57. Yes, I always stack the dishes at restaurants, and I've been asked by multiple people why. I've always just done it. I figure it's because my mom was a waitress for years and taught me to. Story 58. I'm not the best at picking up after myself at home, but my first job was cleaning rooms in a hotel, and my next was waitressing. I know what a pain both of those jobs can be. I leave hotel rooms clean and organized, and the same goes for restaurant tables. It's nice to make someone's day better. Story 59. I knew a guy like that. He was actually kinda always making me feel like the butt of his jokes. Laughed off my concerns. Friendly bully type? I guess everything he did seemed performative. Story 60. Holy, I had friends over and we did a craft, then switched to a game and I put the craft supplies away and the guest was like, "Oh, so we have to leave?" And I had to explain, "No, I just put things away when I'm done with them, but I guess I should wait till the guest leaves." Story 61. Used to have a friend whose house I visited. I went to clean up the crumbs from my meal at the dining table and he's sweeping the crumbs onto the floor and saying, "It's okay. The cleaners will get it. We are not friends anymore." Story 62. A few days ago, my family went to celebrate my younger cousin moving up a grade at a seafood restaurant. It's one of those places that gives you a bib, gloves, and trash buckets. BC, it's expected to get dirty. After everyone finished eating, I started scraping food off into the buckets, stacking plates, cups, and picking up trash. My Nana, someone who has literally ran a restaurant in the decades ago, sarcastically said, "They're not going to hire you, YK? Stop working so hard." Another time, we went to a sit-down deli restaurant. Same thing happened after I started cleaning up. She got annoyed saying, "Just leave it there. They have PPL for that. That's what they're here for." Really ticked me off. Told her that doesn't mean we just leave a mess for them to clean up. Just BC we can. My hat goes off to restaurant workers and the BS they put up with every day. I tried being a busboy in my teenage years and only lasted 2 days before quitting. BC, the labor was absolutely brutal. It's insane to me just how common it is for adults to choose to be inconsiderate at little to no inconvenience. Well, then it shouldn't be an inconvenience to them either. No one table isn't that bad, but they have 15 of those same tables to deal with in the next 10 mins during a lunch rush. Just stack your god plates, meemaw. Story 63. It blows my mind as adults when people don't make the bed after staying somewhere. Even when we stay at my parents', I make the bed and load the dishwasher even though they wouldn't care. It's common courtesy. Story 64. Having been a bartender for years, I don't even think about it when I'm at some other bar. I'll just pick up off of a table and take it to the bar as I'm walking by. Has gotten me so many free drinks from the bartenders for helping out, when I'm not even realizing I'm doing it most of the time. Story 65. My wife is like that with the hyper-awareness. I always thought my hypersensitive senses made me highly aware, but she processes things so much better. Story 66. That's such a beautiful example. It's wild how some people are wired to just notice and act, even when no one expects it. Your dad sounds like the kind of person who quietly makes the world better for everyone around him. Story 67. I did this on a date once. She respectfully asked me to tell her about my mental health issues. Cue 30 minutes straight of me trauma dumping on this poor woman. I didn't even look her in the eyes as I ranted on. Worst part was, that little voice in my head is screaming, "Dude, estafu," and changed the subject, but I was locked in and couldn't stop. When I finally did stop, she excused herself to the ladies' room and came back saying her dog is sick and she had to go. I don't blame her. I deserved that. Story 68. Sometimes I do that, but it's because I'm worried they don't want to talk more in depth about whatever they were talking about, and if I ask, they'll be offended, or I'll ask the wrong question, and they'll be weirded out offended. Like sometimes I'll ask something normal, and they'll give a short answer, so I take it they don't want to talk about it anymore. Yes, I have social anxiety if it wasn't obvious. Story 69. I rarely ask questions about other people and never really talk about myself, but I know a lot more than they ever do, even when they ask questions about me often. IDK. I think it's weird. How do I know more about you and barely speak, yet you ask so much and know the least? Story 70. As a bartender, I am going to apply this to the people who do not seem to understand what last call means, will watch me as I'm closing the bar, and proceed to ask me for another drink. Story 71. Or people who will walk into a restaurant and order or sit down to eat when it's minutes to closing. Just recently, we got pizza from the place next door a half hour before they closed. We stayed till closing to chat. We live literally next door, so we know the workers a bit. At exactly 2 minutes before they close, someone calls and puts in an order. It was so sad to watch all the workers' moods just drop. Story 72. My little brother was a cashier in a large retail shop. One night he was the last on duty, picking up the stragglers. At 9 p.m. the first call went out on the PA, and most people go to the register. At 9:05 the second one, still nice just to remind the remaining few to finish up, and all but one customer goes to pay. At 9:10, a sterner announcement that the shop is actually closed. At 9:15, the floor manager gets out from the office to go tell the last customer that it's time to leave. Turns out, she's deaf and hadn't heard a word. Story 73. I worked at Walmart during COVID, and that was such a pain in the we'd give our 30, 20, 15, 10, 5 and last-minute warnings. Without fail, every day there would be people still trying to shop. Like, no, get the out, we're closed. Fortunately, we were allowed to kick anyone out who wasn't at the registers at 11,000 cartload full of. Sorry, third shift will gladly put that away for you. Story 74. I was putting my cart back at Costco and shoved the other ones together, so it's together like train or whatever it's called, when the employees gather it all back. I do it every time. Why? No idea. For fun, habit to put things back. Don't like it all over the place, and there's always that one person who doesn't shove it all the way in and it's sticking out on the parking lot. I guess all of the above. Anyways, I didn't realize someone, who happened to be an employee, was right there watching me. He said, "That's the first time I've seen someone return a cart and took the time to push them all together. I don't understand how people can't take a few seconds out of their day to put things back." Story 75. I never used to do it. Laziness maybe. Not sure. I'm disabled and usually the returns aren't near the accessible parks. But then I read something about telling yourself what kind of person you are, and I started telling myself that I'm the sort of person who puts trolleys back. And then I became that person and I like myself for it. Story 76. I will fix the carts if they have 2 sizes and people have just been jamming them in all willy-nilly. It drives me nuts seeing it, and I hate the thought of the workers having to be in the heat dealing with it once it gets worse.